Golden State Killer, also known as the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker, is one of the most notorious serial criminals in American history. His reign of terror spanned over a decade, from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s, and left a trail of fear, devastation, and unanswered questions. This is the story of the Golden State Killer, the decades-long manhunt to bring him to justice, and the groundbreaking methods that finally unmasked him. The crimes, the Golden State. Killer's crimes began in Northern California in the mid-1970s, where he was known as the East Area Rapist. He targeted women, often breaking into their homes at night, tying up their husbands or boyfriends, and assaulting his victims. His methods were calculated and brutal. He would stack dishes on the backs of the men he tied up, threatening to kill everyone in the house if he heard the dishes fall. After the assaults, he would often steal small items such as jewelry or coins as trophies. By the late 1970s, his crimes escalated. He began committing murders, earning the moniker Original Night Stalker. His victims included couples and single women, and his attacks were marked by a chilling level of planning and control. He would often surveil his victims for days or even weeks before striking, learning their routines and vulnerabilities. His crimes spread across California, from Sacramento to Orange County, leaving law enforcement agencies struggling to connect the dots. The Golden State Killer's spree included at least 13 murders, more than 50 rapes, and over 120 burglaries. His ability to evade capture for so long was due in part to his meticulous planning, his knowledge of police procedures, and the lack of communication between different law enforcement agencies at the time. For years, his crimes were investigated as separate cases, with no one realizing they were the work of a single individual. The investigation. The investigation into the Golden State Killer's crimes was one of the largest and most complex in U.S. history. Early on, law enforcement agencies struggled to piece together the evidence. The East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker were initially thought to be two different criminals. It wasn't until the early 2000s, with advances in DNA technology, that investigators were able to link the crimes to a single perpetrator. Even with this breakthrough, the killer's identity remained a mystery. He left behind little physical evidence, and his ability to blend into the background made him nearly invisible. Investigators relied on witness descriptions, crime scene analysis, and psychological profiling to build a picture of the suspect. They knew he was a white male in his 20s or 30s, with a lean build and possibly a military or law enforcement background. But without a name or a face, the case seemed destined to remain unsolved. The breakthrough. The turning point in the case came in 2018, when investigators used a groundbreaking technique called genetic genealogy to identify the Golden State Killer. This method involves comparing DNA from a crime scene to publicly available genetic databases, which are often used by people researching their family trees. By identifying relatives of the suspect, investigators can narrow down the list of potential suspects. In this case, investigators uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA to a genealogy website and found a match to a distant relative. From there, they used traditional investigative techniques, such as public records and surveillance, to build a family tree and zero in on their suspect. The breakthrough came when they identified Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer living in Citrus Heights, California. DeAngelo's DNA was a perfect match to the evidence collected from the crime scenes. On April 24, 2018, he was arrested at his home, bringing an end to one of the longest and most frustrating manhunts in U.S. history. The arrest sent shockwaves through the true crime community and brought a sense of closure to the survivors and families of his victims. The man behind the mask. Joseph James DeAngelo's arrest revealed a man who had lived a double life for decades. Before his crimes, DeAngelo had served as a police officer in Auburn, California, and had been in the U.S. Navy. His law enforcement background likely gave him the knowledge and skills to evade capture for so long. After leaving the police force in 1979, he worked as a mechanic and lived a seemingly ordinary life with his family. Those who knew DeAngelo described him as a quiet, unassuming man. His neighbors were shocked to learn that he was the Golden State Killer. Yet beneath this facade of normalcy, DeAngelo harbored a dark and violent side. His crimes were marked by a level of cruelty and control that suggested a deep-seated need for power and domination. The trial and sentencing. In June 2020, Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer and the notorious Golden State Killer, pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping in a landmark case that brought closure to one of California's most infamous crime sprees. The plea deal, which spared him the death penalty, ensured that DeAngelo would receive a life sentence without the possibility of parole. This agreement was reached after years of investigation, including the use of groundbreaking DNA technology that ultimately linked him to the crimes decades after they were committed. The case marked a significant moment in criminal justice, highlighting the power of forensic science in solving cold cases. During the emotionally charged sentencing hearing, survivors and family members of the victims were given the opportunity to confront DeAngelo directly in court. Their heartfelt and often harrowing statements painted a vivid picture of the pain, trauma, and lasting scars he had inflicted on their lives. Many spoke of the decades of fear and grief they had endured, while others expressed relief that justice was finally being served. The hearing was a powerful reminder of the human toll of DeAngelo's crimes, which spanned the 1970s and 1980s, and included burglaries, sexual assaults, and murders. DeAngelo, now in his 70s, appeared as a frail figure in a wheelchair during the proceedings, a stark contrast to the predatory and elusive criminal he had once been. He showed little emotion as the survivors spoke, further underscoring the chilling nature of his crimes. While his guilty plea brought a measure of justice to the victims and their families, it also raised questions about whether he had committed additional crimes that remain unsolved. Some investigators and experts believe that DeAngelo's criminal activities may have extended beyond the cases for which he was convicted, leaving lingering doubts about the full extent of his actions. Nevertheless, his sentencing marked the end of a long and painful chapter for the victims and their loved ones, offering a semblance of closure after decades of uncertainty. The legacy of the Golden State Killer. The case of the Golden State Killer has had a lasting impact on law enforcement and the field of criminal investigation. It highlighted the importance of DNA technology and the potential of genetic genealogy as a tool for solving cold cases. Since DeAngelo's arrest, dozens of other cold cases have been solved using similar methods, leading to the identification of suspects who had long evaded justice. The case also brought attention to the resilience and courage of the survivors. Many of them had spent decades living with the trauma of their experiences, and the arrest and conviction of DeAngelo provided a sense of closure and validation. Their willingness to share their stories has helped raise awareness about sexual violence and the importance of supporting survivors. The decades-long manhunt for the Golden State Killer is a story of perseverance, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of justice. It is also a reminder of the enduring impact of crime on individuals and communities. While Joseph James DeAngelo's arrest and conviction brought an end to one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history, the scars he left behind will never fully heal. The case of the Golden State Killer serves as a testament to the power of technology, the dedication of law enforcement, and the strength of survivors. It is a story of how, even in the face of unimaginable evil, justice can prevail. And it is a reminder that, no matter how long it takes, the truth will always come to light. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more content.